The morning sun touched the tall walls of the city courthouse. Inside the building, people walked in and out with nervous steps. Some came to fight for justice, some came to defend themselves, and others came only to watch. The air was heavy with whispers and tension, because every case in that room had a story behind it. Among the people was a young woman named Mira. She wore a plain gray dress and carried a small bag close to her chest. Mira was not famous, not rich, and not powerful. She was only known in her neighborhood as a quiet woman who helped people whenever she could. But on that morning, her presence in the courthouse would change her life in ways she never imagined. Mira had been called to testify as a witness. She had seen an accident in her street, and now her words could decide the future of a man who was blamed for it. She did not like standing in front of crowds, and she feared speaking in public. But she also knew that truth was more important than her fear. The courtroom was large, with wooden benches, tall windows, and an old clock ticking above the judge's chair. At the center, a serious judge sat high wearing his black robe. Lawyers stood with their files, and guards kept watch at the doors. When Mira's name was called, she slowly walked to the front. Her hands trembled as she held her bag tighter. The judge told her to speak clearly and only share what she saw. Mira nodded, then lifted her eyes to the crowd. She could see curious faces looking at her, some doubting her, some waiting for her words. She spoke about the day of the accident. She explained how the man who stood accused was not the one driving the vehicle. She told them about a different figure she had seen in the driver's seat, someone who escaped before anyone arrived. Her words were calm but strong, and the courtroom became silent as every person listened. The lawyer of the accused man asked questions to confuse her, but Mira answered each with steady voice. She did not let fear take her truth away. The judge leaned forward, clearly surprised at how clear her memory was. Even the guards turned their heads slightly, realizing that her testimony was not ordinary. When she finished, a wave of whispers filled the room. Some believed her, some did not. But one thing was certain: Mira had shifted the case. The accused man looked at her with tears in his eyes, as if he finally saw hope. Yet not everyone in the courtroom was pleased. A guard at the side frowned at Mira's words. He had close ties to someone who wanted the accused to be punished, no matter the truth. He stepped forward and told the judge that Mira might be lying. He tried to silence her voice with accusations, but Mira did not step back. She stood firm and repeated that she only spoke what she saw. Her calmness made the people in the room look at her with new respect. Even those who had doubted her began to wonder if there was more to her than met the eye. The judge called for order and asked for proof to support her testimony. Mira nodded and reached into her bag. From inside, she pulled a small notebook. She had written down details of the accident the same night it happened, including time, weather, and even the color of the driver's clothes. She held the notebook up for the court to see. The judge took the notebook and read silently. His eyes widened, and he tapped the wooden table with his gavel. The details matched the evidence the police had found, though until then, no one had spoken of them. The courtroom gasped. For the first time, the case seemed to bend toward truth instead of pressure. The accused man's lawyer bowed his head in gratitude toward Mira, while the opposing side fell into silence. In that moment, something changed in the air. Mira was no longer just a witness. She was someone who carried the strength of truth, and even the judge could feel it. The people in the benches leaned closer, sensing that this woman, who came with nothing but a notebook and courage, might hold more power than anyone expected. As Mira stepped back, her heart still racing, she did not know that this was only the beginning. The path ahead would test her more than ever before. The simple woman who entered the courtroom as a witness would one day walk toward the judge's seat, and the world inside those walls would never be the same again. After Mira gave her testimony, the courtroom was filled with murmurs. Some people leaned forward to whisper to each other, while others stared at her with wide eyes. It was unusual for a simple woman with no legal training to speak with such confidence and detail. Even the judge took a moment longer than usual to regain his composure before striking the gavel for silence. The accused man's lawyer smiled faintly, but the opposing lawyer frowned and stood again. He tried to shake Mira's confidence by asking more questions. "Are you sure it was not too dark? Could you have mistaken the driver?" he said with a sharp tone. Mira looked directly at him and replied, "I was close to the street lamp. I saw clearly. I did not mistake the driver." Her voice was steady. She did not raise her tone, yet her words carried weight. The judge leaned back in his chair and rubbed his chin. He asked Mira why she had written details in her notebook that night. Mira explained that she had always kept notes about important things in her life. She was not sure why she did it, but something inside her had told her the accident would become important later. Her answer surprised many people. The notebook, plain and simple, seemed stronger than any fancy speech in that room. The judge closed it gently and placed it near his papers. Then he dismissed Mira from the stand, asking her to wait in the courtroom until the session was over. Mira returned to the wooden benches. Her heart still raced, but she felt lighter. She had done her duty, yet she sensed that her journey was far from finished. The eyes of many strangers followed her as she sat down, but she kept her gaze on the floor, trying not to show how nervous she was. At that moment, something unexpected happened. A small group of citizens who had come only to watch the trial began to whisper Mira's name. They had been frustrated with the court for many months, feeling that truth was often hidden by power. To them, Mira's courage felt like a spark of hope. One of them, an elderly man with white hair, leaned toward his friend and said softly, "That woman has more honesty than half the people who stand at the front of this court." Meanwhile, the guard who had doubted Mira clenched his jaw. He had wanted her words to be dismissed, but now it seemed the judge himself was taking her seriously. He muttered under his breath and stepped back to his post, though his eyes stayed fixed on her. Mira noticed his gaze and felt uneasy, but she kept her back straight and refused to let fear control her. The trial moved forward, with more witnesses and more arguments, yet the atmosphere of the courtroom had changed. Mira's testimony echoed in every corner, and even when others spoke, the people seemed to remember her quiet strength. By the end of the session, the judge announced that more investigation was needed. He adjourned the court for another day. People began to stand and leave, their footsteps filling the hall. Mira rose slowly, clutching her bag again. As she walked toward the door, the elderly man who had whispered earlier stepped beside her. "Young woman," he said kindly, "you reminded us that truth has a voice. Do not let anyone silence you." His words touched Mira deeply, and she gave a small nod of thanks before walking out into the sunlight. Outside the courthouse, the city was busy as always, with car horns and street vendors shouting, but inside Mira's heart there was a storm of thoughts. She had entered the building as a simple witness, yet people now looked at her differently. She wondered if this attention would bring danger or responsibility. That night, Mira sat at her small wooden table at home. Her house was modest, with only 2 rooms, but it was filled with warmth. She opened her notebook again and began writing down everything that happened in the courtroom. She wrote about the questions, the looks, and even the moment when the judge held her notebook. She did this not only for memory, but also because she felt that her words might guide her in the future. As she wrote, she thought about the guard's unfriendly eyes. She thought about the lawyer's sharp questions. She also thought about the judge's surprise and the old man's encouragement. Piece by piece, she understood that her voice had entered a place where many people struggled to be heard. Mira was not searching for power. She only wanted truth. But truth, once spoken aloud, had power of its own. And in the days ahead, that power would carry Mira closer to the judge's seat than she ever dreamed. The next morning, the courthouse was busier than before. News had spread about the woman who stood up in court and spoke with such honesty. People wanted to see her again. Some came because they were curious, others because they believed she might bring change. For years, many had complained that the court was slow, unfair, or guided by influence. Mira's calm but brave testimony had given them a reason to hope. Mira did not know about these whispers. She walked quietly toward the courthouse gates with her notebook hidden in her bag. She kept her head low, not wanting attention. Still, as she entered, a few people turned to watch her. She could hear soft voices behind her, but she kept moving. Inside the courtroom, the judge was already seated. The accused man looked nervous but hopeful, while the lawyers prepared their arguments. Guards stood on both sides, their eyes sharp. Mira noticed the same guard who had doubted her the day before. His frown had not left his face, and his stare made her uneasy. But she reminded herself that fear could not guide her steps. She took her seat on the bench quietly. The trial resumed. New evidence was brought forward and more witnesses were called. Yet the case seemed to circle around the same question. Who had really been driving that night? Mira's words still stood as the strongest clue. Every time someone mentioned her testimony, The crowd leaned forward as if listening again to her voice. After some hours, the judge called a short break. People stepped outside for air and lawyers gathered in small groups to talk. Mira stayed on the bench, opening her notebook once more. She read her notes carefully, thinking if she had missed any small detail that could help. A young clerk who worked under the judge noticed her and walked closer. He was curious about this woman who had impressed the entire room. "You speak with courage," he said softly, not wanting others to hear. "Most people fear the courtroom, but you stood like you belonged here." Mira looked up, surprised. "I do not belong here," she replied. "I only wanted to speak the truth." The clerk shook his head gently. "Sometimes truth is stronger than training. Sometimes truth is what this court needs more than long speeches." Then he bowed slightly and returned to his place before anyone noticed their talk. Mira thought about his words. She had never seen herself as more than a simple witness. Yet now even workers inside the court looked at her differently. She wondered if truth could truly be stronger than the walls of power around her. When the break ended, the judge returned. He looked serious and his voice was firm. He said the case had reached a point where the police must reopen their search for the missing driver. This announcement sent a wave of noise across the room. Some people clapped softly, others gasped. For the first time, it felt as though justice was moving in the right direction. The accused man covered his face with his hands, shaking with relief. His lawyer turned to Mira and gave her a respectful nod. On the other side, the opposing lawyer looked displeased. The guard who had doubted Mira tightened his fists but stayed silent. As the session ended for the day, Mira walked out slowly. But this time she did not leave unnoticed. People gathered near the steps of the courthouse waiting to see her. Some thanked her for speaking bravely. A woman in the crowd held her child's hand and said, "You gave us hope." "Do not stop." Mira felt overwhelmed. She had not come to inspire anyone. She had only wanted to do her duty. Yet these voices filled her with a strange mix of fear and strength. She gave a small smile, bowed her head, and walked away toward her small home. That night she could not sleep. She sat near her window looking at the stars. Her notebook lay open on the table. She wrote down everything that had happened again, but this time her words carried more weight. She was not just recording facts. She was recording history, or at least the beginning of it. Mira understood something new that night. The court was not just a place for lawyers and judges. It was a place where truth, when spoken bravely, could change lives. And though she had no plan for it, destiny was quietly pulling her closer to a role she never imagined. Not just a witness, but a leader of justice. The following day, the courthouse was filled even earlier than before. The hallways were crowded with people who had never stepped into a court until now. They came not for the case alone, but because they had heard about Mira. They wanted to see the woman whose words had shaken the silence of power. Mira did not enjoy attention. She walked with her head down, holding her notebook close to her chest. As she entered, whispers followed her. Some people spoke with admiration, some with doubt. She tried to block out their voices, reminding herself that she was here only for truth. Inside, the judge sat quietly, his face calm, but his eyes thoughtful. He too had noticed the change in the room. Rarely did so many citizens attend a trial. Rarely did a single witness gain so much respect from strangers. He struck the gavel and the session began. The lawyers argued again, but this time they placed greater weight on Mira's testimony. The accused man's lawyer asked the court to value her honesty, while the opposing lawyer tried to weaken her words by pointing out that she was not trained in law. When Mira was called forward again, she walked with steady steps. She stood before the court, her notebook ready. The lawyer asked her to repeat certain details about the night of the accident. She spoke clearly, her words the same as before, without hesitation. The opposing lawyer smirked and said, "You speak with confidence, but you are not an expert. How can we trust a woman who has no legal knowledge?" The courtroom grew tense. Some people frowned, while others shook their heads at his harsh tone. Mira, however, did not let herself shrink. She replied calmly, "Truth does not need training. Truth only needs to be seen and remembered." Her words spread through the room like a wave. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. Even he could not deny the power in her simple answer. The trial continued for hours. New evidence was discussed, but Mira's testimony remained at the center. By the end, the judge announced that further investigation would continue, and the case would not close until the missing driver was found. As the gavel struck, the crowd stirred. Many people smiled, some clapped softly before being silenced by guards. Mira stepped back, ready to leave, but once again the people in the benches watched her closely. When she exited the courthouse, a small group of citizens followed her outside. They gathered around her on the steps. A man in a worker's uniform spoke first. "You have courage. You speak when others are silent. The court listens to you in a way it never listens to us." Another voice joined, this time a young woman. "We need someone like you inside that room. Someone who cares for truth, not only for power." Mira was taken aback. She shook her head. "I am no leader. I only speak what I saw." But the crowd did not seem to hear her modest words. They spoke among themselves, saying that a person like Mira was rare. In a world where many feared to stand, she stood. That alone, they said, was strength. Later that evening, Mira walked home slowly, her thoughts heavy. She felt the weight of the people's hope pressing on her shoulders. She never asked for it. She only wanted to tell the truth. Yet she began to realize that once truth was spoken aloud, it no longer belonged to her alone. It belonged to everyone who believed in it. At home, she lit a small lamp and opened her notebook. Her hand trembled slightly as she wrote down the events of the day. The lawyer's mocking tone, the people's voices outside, the judge's expression, all were captured on her pages. As she wrote, she thought of the guard who had doubted her. Each day, his eyes grew colder. She could feel resistance rising against her. For every person who cheered for her, there might be another who wanted her voice silenced. Still, Mira decided she would not stop. If she had been given a voice strong enough to shake the courtroom, she would not waste it. She whispered to herself, "Truth is heavier than fear." That night, she closed her notebook with care and set it beside her bed. She did not know how far her journey would go. She did not know that the people's whispers would grow louder each day, carrying her name beyond the courthouse walls. Mira slept with determination in her heart, unaware that destiny was quietly building a path toward the judge's seat. The days that followed brought more attention to the courthouse than anyone expected. By the fifth session of the trial, the benches were filled not only with the families of those involved, but also with citizens from across the city. They spoke of Mira in the markets, in tea shops, and in the narrow streets. They said she was not just a witness, she was a symbol of courage. Mira herself tried to stay quiet. She rose early each morning, dressed simply, and walked with her notebook hidden in her bag. She did not look for crowds, yet crowds seemed to find her. People greeted her as she entered the courthouse, some even thanking her with small bows. Mira smiled politely but kept her steps steady, reminding herself that her duty was not to fame but to truth. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere grew heavier. The judge noticed how much influence Mira's words carried. The opposing lawyer who had once laughed at her now looked uneasy whenever she entered the room. And the guard with sharp eyes never stopped watching her. That day, new evidence was brought. A broken piece of the vehicle's mirror had been found, and the police were beginning to match fingerprints. The accused man looked toward Mira with hope, as if her voice had opened a door that had been locked for him. The judge allowed the evidence to be read aloud, and slowly the case moved further in his favor. But with progress came resistance. During the break, the opposing lawyer whispered angrily to the guard. Their eyes shifted toward Mira, and though she could not hear their words, she felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that truth often angered those who tried to hide it. After the break, Mira was asked once again to answer questions. She stepped forward, her notebook in her hand. The opposing lawyer tried to confuse her with complicated questions about the distance of the streetlight, the speed of the vehicle, and the shadows of the night. But Mira did not falter. She explained what she saw in plain words. She admitted where she was unsure, but she never changed her main point, that the accused was not the driver. The people in the benches nodded quietly. Some even whispered encouragement. The judge leaned forward, clearly impressed that Mira's words remained strong after so many days of questioning. When the session ended, the courthouse steps became louder than usual. A group of workers gathered around Mira, telling her that her voice gave them courage. They had always believed the court was far away from the people, but now they felt closer to it because of her. Mira listened, humbled, but she did not promise anything. She only told them, "Truth is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us." That night, however, the weight of expectation grew heavier. Mira returned to her small home and sat by her table. She lit her lamp and opened her notebook again. The pages were filled with careful words written each night after the court. But tonight her writing was slower. Her hand shook as she thought about the eyes of the guard and the whispers of the lawyer. She asked herself if she was safe. She asked herself if she should have stayed silent that first day. Yet when she remembered the accused man's face, the tears in his eyes, and the hope in the crowd, she knew silence would have been worse. Fear could not erase truth. In the quiet of the night, Mira heard a knock at her door. Her heart jumped. She hesitated before opening it. To her relief, it was the old man who had spoken to her after the first session. He held a walking stick and smiled warmly. "Child," he said gently, "do not let fear trouble you. You have awakened something important in this city. The people see you as a voice for them. That is why some will try to push you down. But remember, even a single candle can light a dark hall." Mira's eyes softened. She invited him inside and they spoke for a while. He told her that he had seen many trials but never one where the people cared so much. He believed Mira was meant for more than just a witness stand. When he left, Mira sat quietly in her room staring at her notebook. She realized that destiny was pushing her toward a place she had never imagined. She did not ask for power, yet it was being placed near her feet. As she blew out her lamp and lay down to rest, one thought stayed with her. The path of truth was leading her closer to the judge's seat. And whether she was ready or not, the city itself was beginning to expect it. The next day, dark clouds hung over the city as Mira made her way to the courthouse. The streets were wet from morning rain and puddles reflected the tall buildings. Mira walked carefully, her notebook tucked safely inside her bag. Her steps were steady, but her mind was restless. She knew the case was moving closer to truth, yet she also knew resistance was growing stronger. When she reached the courthouse steps, she saw more people than ever before. Men, women, and even children had gathered, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman whose voice had echoed through the court. Some raised their hands in greeting. Others held small signs with simple words like truth and justice. Mira's cheeks warmed with shyness. She had never been the center of attention in her life. She gave a small nod to the crowd and entered quickly, hoping to avoid drawing more notice. Inside, however, the air was just as tense. The judge looked serious as he began the session. More evidence had been collected and the police had discovered tracks that matched another suspect. The case was no longer simple. What Mira had said about a different driver now had proof to support it. The accused man sat straighter, his eyes filled with cautious hope, but with hope came anger from the other side. The opposing lawyer stood tall, his voice sharp. He claimed Mira had misled the court. He suggested that her growing influence among the citizens was dangerous. "This is a courtroom, not a stage for crowds," he said firmly. His words were aimed not only at the judge but also at Mira. Mira felt her heart pound, but she kept her voice calm. "I do not speak for crowds. I only speak for truth." The room became silent again. Even the judge paused for a moment before continuing. He reminded both lawyers that the case must be guided by evidence, not pride or pressure. Still, Mira could sense that her presence had begun to disturb those who were used to controlling the court. During a short break, Mira stepped into the hallway. She hoped for a moment of peace, but instead she found the guard waiting near the door. His eyes were cold and his words were low. "You speak too much," he said. "People are listening to you more than they listen to the judge." "That is dangerous." Mira's breath caught, but she did not step back. She looked him in the eye and replied, "Danger is silence when truth is needed." The guard's jaw tightened. Without another word, he turned away. Mira stood still for a moment, steadying herself before returning to the courtroom. When the session ended that afternoon, Mira once again found people waiting for her outside. Some thanked her, others asked her to keep fighting. She listened quietly, offering only a few humble words before walking home. That evening, as rain tapped gently on her window, Mira sat at her table. She opened her notebook and began to write. She described the guard's warning, the lawyer's sharp words, and the growing voices of the people. Each word she wrote carried both fear and courage. As the lamp flickered, Mira heard another knock at her door. This time it was the young clerk from the courthouse. He looked around nervously before stepping inside. "People inside the court are speaking of you," he whispered. "Some fear you, others respect you. But the truth is, your words are changing more than this one case. They are changing how people see justice itself. Mira listened quietly, her hands resting on the notebook. The clerk leaned closer. You must be careful, but you must also be ready. If the people trust you more than the ones in power, the day may come when you are asked to do more than speak as a witness. The words weighed heavily on Mira. She had never dreamed of power, never dreamed of sitting in the judge's seat, yet the thought lingered, pulling at her mind. After the clerk left, Mira sat in silence. The city outside was restless, filled with voices of both hope and fear. She could feel the path of her life stretching into something unknown. The guard's warning echoed in her ears, but so did the voices of the people. She closed her notebook slowly, her heart heavy but strong. She did not know what awaited her in the next session, but one truth was clear. She could no longer walk away. The court, the people, and even destiny itself were pushing her toward a place she had never imagined. And deep inside, she wondered if one day she truly might sit in the judge's seat. The alien fleet had returned. This time it was larger and faster than before. Every human ship was ready. Earth's fleets gathered in orbit, forming lines of defense around the planet. Cities below waited in silence. Lights dimmed as people watched the sky. The world knew this battle could decide the fate of humanity. General Ryan stood in the command center. Screens displayed the enemy ships moving in formation, their blue lights glowing cold against the blackness of space. His voice carried over the communication systems. They come to destroy us. Hold your courage. Protect your home. Fight together. Leanne checked her Starhawk for the last time. Her squadron gathered around her, engines humming with quiet power. Each pilot's face was set with determination. Leanne looked at them and said, "We are the shield of Earth. Every strike we make, every ship we save, tells the enemy they cannot break us. We fight for our home, for everyone on the ground." The alien ships moved swiftly, attacking with precision. Missiles and energy beams tore through space, striking human ships. Explosions lit the darkness, sending trails of fire across orbit. Human pilots dodged and fired back, their weapons striking alien vessels with accuracy guided by strategy and courage. Aaron, in his observatory, monitored the battle. His instruments tracked alien movements in real time. He guided Ryan and the fleets by decoding the enemy patterns. "They are breaking formation," he reported. "Focus fire on the edges. Push their lines back. Do not let them regroup." The battle raged for hours. Human ships were damaged, some destroyed, but they fought relentlessly. Leanne's squadron dove into the heart of the enemy formation, taking on larger ships with skill and bravery. Her Starhawk shuddered under the weight of battle, but she pressed forward, aiming for the largest alien ship at the center of their fleet. Explosions erupted as missiles and energy beams struck the target. The alien ship shattered into pieces, scattering debris into space. Confusion spread through the enemy ranks. Aaron's calculations predicted their next moves, allowing human forces to strike with perfect timing. Ryan's voice over the comms was calm and firm. "They falter. Do not let them recover. Push forward. Show them the strength of humanity." On Earth, people watched the sky, seeing streaks of fire and light above them. Families held hands and children pointed at the glowing trails, not fully understanding the danger, but feeling pride for the bravery of those who defended their planet. Leanne led her remaining pilots in a final strike. They weaved through enemy fire and attacked the alien ships closest to the planet. One by one, the ships exploded, leaving the enemy fleet in chaos. The humans did not pause to celebrate. Every moment counted until the last enemy ship turned away, retreating into the darkness of space. At last, silence returned to orbit. Human ships hovered among the debris, damaged but victorious. Leanne looked out at the stars, seeing the wreckage of the alien fleet. She whispered, "We did it. Earth stands." Ryan turned to Mira in the command center. "They came to break us, but we stood strong. They will remember this day." Mira nodded, her eyes steady. "Yes, today humanity has proven itself. We are not weak. We are not subjects. We are free." On the ground, people cheered, streets filled with applause, songs, and celebration. Humanity had survived the most dangerous threat it had ever faced. The courage of the pilots, the strategy of the generals, and the work of scientists like Aaron had saved the planet. In the quiet afterward, Ryan addressed his commanders. "The enemy will return, but they now know we cannot be broken. Humanity has sent its message. Our place among the stars is earned through courage, strength, and unity. Leon stood among her squadron, tired but proud. They had lost friends, but they had defended their home. Aaron, watching from his observatory, smiled faintly. Humanity had faced judgment from the stars and had passed. The last stand had ended. Earth had survived, and its defenders had proven that humanity would not bow to any threat. The stars above were vast and mysterious, but humanity's fire now shone brightly among them. The battle in orbit had ended. Earth's fleets floated among the wreckage of alien ships, damaged but undefeated. Humanity had survived the most dangerous test it had ever faced. The world below celebrated, but the leaders knew the war was not yet over. The aliens had retreated, but their judgment had not ended. Humanity needed to send a message. In the Earth Union Council, Mira spoke with quiet authority. They watched us. They judged us. They tested our courage, our will, and our unity. Now we must speak. We must send a message that they will hear and remember. General Rion nodded. Not threats, not warnings. A statement of who we are. A declaration that Earth stands together, strong and free. Scientists and engineers worked to prepare the transmission. Aaron decoded the alien communication systems, finding a way to send a message across vast distances without interference. The final message would not be words of fear or surrender. It would carry strength, intelligence, and dignity. Leanne and her squadron were chosen to deliver it. Their ships carried the transmission devices, designed to broadcast humanity's declaration directly to the enemy. Every pilot knew the importance of the mission. They were not only defending Earth, they were speaking for every human life below. As the Starhawk and the other ships rose toward the edge of the solar system, families and soldiers watched. The fleet moved with precision, each ship a symbol of Earth's courage. Leanne felt a weight in her chest, not of fear, but of responsibility. We carry more than weapons, she said. We carry the spirit of humanity. The transmission began. The words were simple but powerful. They spoke of Earth's unity, its courage in the face of impossible odds, and the determination of humans to survive. The message did not threaten. It did not boast. It declared truth. Humanity would defend its home, its freedom, and its place among the stars. Aaron monitored the signal, making sure it reached the alien fleets beyond the solar system. Every line of code and sound was designed to be understood. It carried history, struggle, and resolve. It carried the proof that Earth's people were no longer subjects of fear, but a force to respect. As the message traveled, Leon looked at the stars. She thought of the first battle, the fear, the doubt, and the courage it had taken to reach this moment. She remembered her squadron, her friends who had flown beside her and those who would never return. They had all contributed to this statement. This was the voice of humanity. Back on Earth, Mira addressed the world one last time. We have faced the unknown and survived. We have shown courage when fear threatened to divide us. Today, humanity speaks to the stars. We are strong. We are united. We will not bow to threats. We will defend our home. Let this message reach those who watch us. Let them understand that Earth belongs to those who fight for it. Ryan watched the sky and felt pride. Humanity had endured countless challenges, and now it had shown its strength to the universe. They will hear us, he said quietly. And they will know that Earth is not a planet to be tested or conquered. It is a world of fighters, thinkers, and dreamers. Leon's squadron completed the mission. The signal carried across the stars, reaching distances the aliens could not ignore. It was not an act of violence, but of courage and clarity. It was the final message of the conflict so far. Humanity was awake, aware, and united. On Earth, people celebrated, not just for survival, but for the statement they had made to the universe. Children looked at the night sky with wonder, dreaming of the future. Soldiers rested, knowing their courage had shaped history. Scientists smiled, proud that knowledge had guided them through the darkness. The final message had been sent. Humanity had survived the storm, faced judgment, and emerged with dignity. The aliens had seen the fire of human will, and the universe had heard Earth's voice. For the first time, humanity could look at the stars not as subjects, not as prey, but as equals. They had proven themselves, and their story among the stars had only just begun.